and welcome to our latest edition of Weather or Not. I'm meteorologist Brian Karstens. Thank you so much for joining us. And I've been part of the weather programs this week on KELOLAND. I haven't been able to join Scott on this show. Today, he is taking the day off, so I am here as your host, and we're going to cover a lot of topics today on the program. Of course, we've been busy most of the week tracking an area of low pressure. It's been the topic. Boy, some big-time rain totals, parts of central and north-central South Dakota. So we're going to definitely dive into that story. And then, of course, on the opposite end of the spectrum, Sioux Falls, it has been a week of watching scattered rain. But locally around Sioux Falls, it's been definitely more sporadic. But today, there's still a little rain out there, and we'll be chatting about that. Of course, we got to cover the weekend. We're going to get into those details. It looks like this weather system will be fizzling. Then we get to chat about next week. Is next week the official beginning of autumn? Absolutely. The time flies, doesn't it? So I guess summer is officially over, although it's been feeling like it lately. We've had warm numbers to start the week, and then really our temperatures the last couple of days being affected by more clouds and rain than anything else. But we're not done yet with the warm weather. We'll be seeing more on that here in a little bit. Well, here is the satellite and the radar picture. And isn't it interesting to watch all of the moving pieces to this system? Really, it's not one low pressure center. There's the main low spinning in the middle of South Dakota. But when you look at a map like this, do you notice all the other pieces moving around it? Like there's a separate low in western Iowa that kind of gets absorbed, moving up into western Minnesota. That's from last night. Had some pretty decent rainfall totals around the Worthington spots on the map, southwest Minnesota, all the way up to Fargo, Moorhead, getting rain out of that chunk of moisture. There's another little piece that moves right out of Billings, Montana. Do you see that? All the way south of Rapid City. Interesting pattern. So the haves, the have-nots. We've said it many, many times. And it is a little frustrating when you see a low like that, and then you end up with a week of rainfall totals under a quarter inch. I can raise my hand to that too. We've had a little more than that at my place, about 40 hundredths, but when you need an inch or two, or you could use an inch or two of rain to kind of soak up the ground, well, this is the way it's gone. It's all basically piled up northwest of Sioux Falls. Today, we're dealing with the wraparound remnants. So we get these spots that'll come back to life on radar this afternoon. Watertown, Brookings, Marshall, Sisseton, basically east of the James Valley. It's fair to say it could rain at times, and we even see more of this tonight and tomorrow. So for football tonight, not impossible to catch some rain in the Northeast. Sioux Falls, less likely. But even tomorrow, as we get into Saturday morning, we're not entirely done. We still see some evidence of a little rain across the Northeast. I would say Sioux Falls. Still, I like the idea of having highs right around 72 and more mid-70s into western South Dakota. So temperature-wise, we're in pretty good shape here as we begin the weekend. Well, of course, we've got a lot to get to. We're going to be covering our forecast for the weekend and what's ahead for next week. That's all next as we continue on this latest edition of Weather or Not. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Weather or Not. I'm meteorologist Brian Karstens. Well, as promised, this segment, I wanted to share with you a couple of interesting things about the rainfall patterns the last few days. And what we're going to do here to start off this conversation, we have a lot of interesting ways we can tally rainfall, different time periods. So I want to really sort this out because some of you watching this program are saying to yourself, Brian, we didn't get a lot of rain this week. What's happened? Fair question. Others of you watching are saying, Brian, we've had so much rain. Be nice to kind of turn it off a little bit. That's true as well. Look at the map. You can see and this is as of Friday early in the day, some rain, of course, west of Huron. And you look at a map like that, you can definitely see some trends over a 3-hour period. Now, if we expand this out, and this is going to take us out to the last 12 to 24 hours. So it basically takes in Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, last night, and into Friday. So as of the time that this show was airing, you can see the rain has basically, accumulated northwest of Sioux Falls. Look at the gap in there right around Sioux Falls. You're wondering to yourself, well, why is that? Why is it raining east of Sioux Falls, north of Sioux Falls, west, even you could argue south, Omaha, Sioux City? Well, low pressure is sitting and has been sitting and spinning just west of Sioux Falls, Mitchell, Chamberlain area. What that's been doing in the last 24 hours is responsible for a little dry punch right coming up out of northeast Nebraska. Now, the placement of that just happens to be over Sioux Falls. If the low had stalled a little bit to the west or a little bit farther to the east, that particular feature would be shifted on the weather map. But I just want to give you some context to that. So that's why we're seeing that. Now, you add in everything else this week. There's a 2-day total. Look at those colors. The legend on that map shows us yellow, orange. Those are numbers of 2 inches or more. Some of you are 5 to 7, even locally 8 inches of rainfall. Now, I haven't pointed this out, but there are some green boxes on there around Stanley County. A lot of runoff moving in, even west of Mobridge as well. And that's just to account for just the simple fact that we have some flooding. The tributaries and the creeks going into the Bad River and Fort Pierre, that's out of its banks, and others as well, other streams and tributaries. So be careful of that as we start the weekend. But 5-day total, that illustrates things pretty well. How about 7 days? Now, this was a map I showed during KELOLAND this morning, and I was just trying to draw some contrast in the numbers. So we have to be careful. This map is just Doppler radar estimates. It is not necessarily an exact rain gauge report, but it gives us a pretty good ballpark idea of what we're dealing with. Look at how much of KELOLAND, if you draw a line about the James Valley, go all the way west to Buffalo, that is solid 2, 3, 4 inches of rain. Purple, talking 7, 8 inches. Now, I do have a viewer up near Timber Lake, and they emailed us this morning about 7 inches in the rain gauge, and they were careful to comment, too, about that no storm, just rain. And, of course, it can soak in if it comes down at the right pacing, but amazing to see that. By the way, if you're curious, too, I know Scott commented yesterday about this. Rain totals around Mobridge were easily outpacing the previous record for the wettest September. Mobridge, you could probably add a lot of towns here, north central South Dakota. This is top of the line, biggest rain totals of September. Sioux Falls, the opposite, although there's been some rain. Remember earlier in the week, what was that, Tuesday? We had that 2.5 inch downpour on the southwest side of Sioux Falls. So that 1/4 inch is just a number for the lesser areas. And it represents, really what it represents is a 1/4 inch or less, because honestly, there are a lot of us that haven't had a whole lot. I think I had about 40 hundredths at my place around Canton. So a little rain there. More rain northwest Iowa. Certainly some areas, too, that have picked up showers, thunderstorms. Southwest Minnesota, same thing. If you add 7 days together, you'll find some decent rain totals. So that gives us a little perspective. Upper level lows are notorious for this. The rain will pile up in an area, a patch, and then you'll skip over, and then you'll ask yourself the question, well, why didn't it rain here? And that's the nature of cut-off lows. They are literally cut off from the jet stream, and they just don't let things pass through in an orderly fashion. It tends to stall, pile up in one spot, leaves another community relatively dry. So I hope that explains a little bit about what we've been dealing with this week. Certainly, the weather patterns will be changing, though, as we get into next week. We're going to visit about that story coming up next as we continue on Whether or Not. Stay with us. Welcome back to Whether or Not. I'm meteorologist Brian Karstens. Well, the weekend is here. Let's take a look at the weather forecast, shall we, as we dive into this next weather segment. So a couple of maps here we're going to share with you today as it pertains to the weekend forecast. And obviously looking at low pressure finally losing its grip. It's been quite a week. So here we go. This is the weather map as we finish up on this Friday. Low pressure over eastern South Dakota. Now, it's been coming at us, there's several ways to look at this pattern. Yes, there's a parent low. There have been other pieces working around this system. So the rain chances, they're not gone, but they definitely have more of a scattered look to them. And so this takes us into tonight and into Saturday morning. So you can see some leftover clouds. And if you are in the Watertown area, for example, anybody, western Minnesota, yep, we could run a few shower chances on Saturday. Sioux Falls, it's not impossible to catch that, but it's certainly less likely that we would have any sustainable rain. West River, central South Dakota, 70s expected. Sioux Falls even at 72 for your Saturday, and I think more 70s into Sunday. Isn't it interesting, even on Sunday, do you see a little bit of rain there on the Nebraska border? There have been some discussions behind the scenes here whether or not to add a little bit of rain to the forecast because of that. The weather pattern is basically straightening back up. We're beginning to pick up a westerly flow in the jet stream. And so can it rain? Is that even possible? Well, it is. Next week, though, we kind of go back to this blockier pattern in some regards to our south. This is that 500, what we call a 500 millibar pattern. So you think about moving about halfway through the atmosphere. These are the steering winds. These are the areas of high pressure, low pressure. We like to talk about that to give us a broader perspective of the weather and where things are moving. Let me do this for a moment. Let's stop this animation. Let's go in here. Just take a look a little bit slower. I like to do that. This takes us into early next week. So what do we find here? Well, certainly, there are a couple of, like right near Billings, Montana. Do you see that little circle right in there? Takes that dive into Kansas. So there is a system next week. It's in our forecast to affect Rapid City, Pierre. Sioux Falls could get some implications there. It's also very, very obvious when you see a pattern like that. Next week, middle of next week, just after the official start of fall. Well, excuse me here, we end up with a blocking pattern, okay? And this is what we call, actually, on its face value, if it stayed stagnant like this, this would be an omega block. But things are moving. It's not all stationary because you see the low in Missouri. Right there it goes into the Great Lakes. More ridging overhead here. That keeps us mild. We're not entertaining any colder air. And if you look way at the bottom of your screen, you see that disturbance near Miami. Tropical weather could be in the offing. There have been a lot of forecasters watching that. So far, it's remained pretty quiet. We'll see how long that continues. But we are in hurricane season, and it's something that we do need to be aware of, at least at the end of that forecast. Now, this map is going to go ahead and put in the high and low pressure centers. So there's our low. There's our system from the last few days, kind of shearing out, kind of falling apart. High pressure to our southwest, so that's building back in. That's going to give us an amplification. Our temperatures are going to go up getting into Monday. Upper 70s. You notice, too, there is a little rain in there south of Sioux Falls, west of Sioux Falls. It's there. Thunderstorms could easily develop in a pattern like this from western Nebraska into Kansas. So it's not like we don't have rain around us, but at this point, if that continues to be the trend, then more of that goes to our south. Next week, though, west-northwest flow looks really obvious here, and that typically keeps our temperatures at or above normal. I really don't see any evidence to have any major pipeline to cold weather through the end of the month. So we're going to end up having a warmer and above-average September and a much wetter September for the vast majority of those of you watching us to the west. Temperature-wise, we've got a couple of little items here to show. This is our temperature trend map, blue representing below normal, and the orange and red above normal. Do you see how that blue over South Dakota shrinks? Why is that? Shouldn't it be getting colder from Canada? Well, no. Canadian air right now, this takes us out to the 22nd of September. All of those red and orange colors to our north, that is modified Pacific air. Remember, air mass comes off the Pacific Ocean, even off the coast of Canada and Alaska. That's actually relatively mild. But what it does is it comes up and over top of the Rockies, descends, comes down, and it warms. And so as that process occurs, we get these large areas of above normal conditions in central and southern Canada. So as long as that is available to push in there to the prairie provinces, we're not going to see anything close to what I would consider to be colder weather. Most of our days are in the 70s. A pattern like that, that's September 29th. So that's a little ways out, but that tells me we've got some life left here into these temperatures being above average. Of course, Mr. Mundt has talked about early October. Interesting, isn't it? You see a little signal of some cooler weather. I would imagine there's more to watch, but again, at this point, it's just a little speculation. But it is interesting that his calendar, we talked about this, last week? I know we did. We had a couple graphics on this, on his cyclical pattern that he identified, and that takes us right about to that timeline. So let's check back in next week on that. That'll be interesting to follow. All right, that'll do it for this segment. Now we're going to come back. Coming up next, can we talk about snow? Well, we do that a little bit on this show, at least to have some fun conversation. We'll do that next. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Well, for those of you who love winter, there's a few of you out there. I'm ready for fall. Can we just stop with fall, perhaps? But no, on this segment, we have to talk a little bit about winter because Scott, of course, started a trend for us, and I'm not gonna let him down today. We're gonna talk about the extended forecast. So just a little bit of a clarification as to what we're looking at here. This is the long-range European model. Okay, when I say long range, I'm talking 45 days into the future. Now, what do we know about weather forecasting? Well, it's pretty obvious. Longer you go out in time, the more uncertainty there is, right? So is this useful? Is it relevant? Is it worth looking at? Yes, absolutely it is. I think there are things in here that we should be paying attention to. Now, are we going to get nitpicky about where things pop up on this map? No. Okay. So this is just for some value, and we'll put it at that. So what we're looking at is snow forecasts going out in time. Now, this map right here, this takes us out to the first week of October. You see any snow? Not much. Yeah, our pattern is above normal, right? So keep going. Let's say mid-October. Do you see a little bit of reflections of that in South Dakota? Well, there is a little bit. And by the middle of the month, a little more snow across Canada. I always think, and this might be a good opportunity to do this, let's bring up more of the continent. There we go. Now we're looking way up toward the Arctic Circle. So why would we pay attention to that? Well, if you really get into winter forecasting, like Mr. Mundt does, okay, a couple things. You want to watch the northern hemispheric snow and the accumulation over large land masses, because the more accumulation you have early in the season, that is a factor. Now, this is just looking at northern Canada, okay? Well, since we're on this whole topic, let me see if I can do this. There's the northern hemisphere. Aha, even more interesting. So now we've got the North Pole right there. Here's Russia. You can see some of the snow in Asia. Yeah, it's a big deal to watch some of this growing. Now, this is just a 7-day timeline, okay? Takes us out into, the end of October. Here's another graphic I can show. Let me bring this up here. We'll go over here and bring this back. Now, we're going to change this up a little bit. This is now the entire 46-day forecast. Interesting. Let me go back up here. So this takes in everything. Is there going to be snow the next 45 days? Well, yes, there is. north of Manitoba. We're talking the Northwest Territories. It's a long ways up there. I get it. But you have to remember, this is where winter starts. If you're looking for the origins, you're looking for those air masses that are beginning to cool. They take on the characteristics of the accumulation of snow. Now, just for fun, I know somebody's looking at this saying, Brian, there's some snow not that far from KELOLAND on this map. What is this? Yeah, that's an interesting little artifact of the model. What does that mean? Well, it tries to spit out some snow the last week of October. Is that a surprise? No, not at all. Would I worry about that? Not at all. A lot of things we can watch. This is another product we have. Now, this one here is more of an average. This kind of tones out those particular streaks. This is just looking at some general trends. Well, yeah, it produces some snow at the middle part of the month. Now, let's take a moment and look at temperatures. This is even more interesting to see if this actually matches what the modeling is saying. So right off the bat here, what do you see? Orange, yellow, above normal temperatures, right? So let's see if you head down the road, does that continue? Well, it tends to kind of wash out that effect, but this product is not necessarily super cold, is it? Okay, so again, for what it's worth, for today's discussion, just something to keep an eye on. I'm sure Scott will have more to say about this pattern as we get into next week. We just get to watch this stuff for now. But I know it seems a little early, maybe, but the calendar says officially fall next week, and then it's October, and then it does start to get cooler usually. All right, well, I'm out of time for today, but we thank you for watching today's program. Of course, it's always on demand as you enjoy your weekend. I'm meteorologist Brian Karstens. We'll see you back here next time.